welcome to Writers of the World. Our panel today is centered around Brain Injury Awareness Month, and each of our four author panelists bring their own unique perspective and set of experiences to the discussion. Donna O'Donnell Figurski is the author of Prisoners Without Bars, A Caregiver's Tale. Her life has revolved around brain injury since her husband had a traumatic brain injury and she became his forever caregiver. She writes an award-winning blog at survivingtraumaticbraininjury.com and hosts a radio show on blogtalkradio.com/braininjuryradio. Deb Brandon is the award-winning author of But My Brain Had Other Ideas, a memoir of recovery. She's a professor in the Department of Mathematical Sciences at Carnegie Mellon University. She is also a respected textile artist, brain injury survivor, writer, and public speaker. She is dedicated to raising awareness about brain injury. Jeannette Davidson-Mayer is the author of Our Central Command Post, an adaptive military family home. Through her role as an Elizabeth Dole Foundation Fellow alumni, she advocates on behalf of military caregivers nationwide by sharing knowledge with other military families so they can create their own personal strength and knowledge to keep moving forward. She helps education elected officials and civilians on who caregivers are and what supports they need. Sue Meck is the author of I Forgot to Remember, a memoir of amnesia. She seeks the opportunity to perform often as a rock and roll drummer and singer while continuing to write stories, both fiction and nonfiction, as well as essays and poetry. Sue also hopes to extend her outreach by continuing to speak publicly on behalf of traumatic brain injury survivors, their families, friends, as well as the medical community with a particular emphasis on mental health communities. Welcome, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
So the first question is, what does Brain Injury Awareness Month mean to you, and how do you feel it helps the community?
I think that Brain Injury Awareness Month is really a very, very important time to make people in the general community understand some little things about brain injury. I think that it shouldn't be just 1 month. It should be every single month, all 12 months, because it's so important for people to understand what people who are going through a brain injury and their caregivers are dealing with and are experiencing. So I just feel that it's an ongoing process all the time, because a brain injury is a forever injury. It doesn't go away, and your life changes drastically. It turns upside down for many people, and I think other people need to understand that. They need to understand what the survivor's going through, as well as the caregiver, because it's really unique. It's not something that can just happens and then it heals and gets better.
I 1000% agree with everything Donna said. The other thing that I would add to that is that there are a lot of veterans with traumatic brain injury. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of athletes with traumatic brain injury, but there are also a lot of people that are not athletes and veterans that mm-hmm. suffer from this horrible TBI-ness. And I also agree that it should be every month, because by the time March is over, we've forgotten about March. And so it should be then April too.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the important things about brain injury awareness is we used to think, as a brain injury survivor, I think of other brain injury survivors, I think of caregivers, but many people don't really think that they encounter brain injury survivors. I mean, one of the things I do in my classrooms is I'll say, how many of you have suffered a brain injury, including concussions? And the hands up, on the order of 15 to 20% hands go up, and everyone else is looking around them, and it's almost as if they're surprised that they see people who have suffered this thing, but they look like them. The fact that it's an invisible injury and that it has repercussions that are not visible is something that so many people aren't aware of.
When I saw this question, I was taken back going, oh, I had totally forgotten March was Awareness Month, because I live and breathe it every day with my husband having his brain injury. For me, the month of March is critical because it is our one time that nationwide we can extremely push how much it is the invisible injury for so many people. You look at an invisible wound and you think they're walking, they're talking, they're fine, but they're not. They have anxieties, they have, some have, depending on which part of the brain is affected, depends on their ability to function. So Brain Injury Awareness Month is vital to help educate our general public on the ins and outs of how it does affect not only our survivors, but as is clearly stated by previous panelists here today, but it also affects our caregivers. And we have primary caregivers, secondary caregivers, you know, and the list goes on as far as who it does affect. There is a domino effect on the caregiver side, your children and family members and friends. And those are people that need to be aware of who it affects when you have a brain injury in your family.
And can you tell us about your background and why you decided to write a book about your experiences?
My background is some about, I do have a lot of medical background, and then I spent a lot of years in human resources as a human resource director for a nice large company. When my husband got deployed to Iraq in 2004, 2005. We knew he'd come home different. We knew I would be different, but that's when the thinking stopped. We didn't think anymore. And when he came home, I saw minor changes in him that gradually got worse and worse. And I started writing about the changes that he was having and experiencing. And my writing started getting picked up and published by other people, other organizations. They really liked hearing what I had to say. And then friends and family started encouraging me, and it took several years for me to get the courage up to write a book. But it was those experiences of sharing our story that I realized was helping other people, other caregivers, first off, realize that they weren't alone. And other brain injury survivors were like, I want to do what you've just accomplished in your home. I want to try to do that to support my caregiver. And then a lot of civilians would come up to me, and I say civilians because of the military background. So non-military people would come up to me and they would say, we thought your husband was fine. We thought everything was fine because he was home. You know, all the side effects of war, nobody would think about the long-term side effects. And so it really helped to be able to start educating people that, you know, blast injuries are long-term side effects. They're different from what a lot of people anticipated as being a brain injury of getting hit on the head versus a blast injury. So it was nice to be able to give that kind of education and to share with other people so they knew what was happening, why it was happening, and how they could either make a difference in a caregiver and survivor's life, or that they aren't alone, and how what we're doing works for us, but it's flexible and changeable and adaptable so that they can take what I've written in my book and adapt it to their home, because what I've written isn't good as gold. It's adaptable and flexible for them.
Okay, I guess I'll go next then. Something about my background. Well, I met my husband who had the TBI when I was 16 years old. And I knew that moment, within 15 minutes of meeting him, that I was going to marry him. 4 years later, I did. So David is not only my husband of almost 50 years this year in August, but he's been my best friend for forever, since I'm 16. So this was a real huge blow to us when he had his brain injury, as it would be to anybody, you know, but it really took its toll. And when David had the brain injury, I would just basically jumped in and did what I needed to do with it, and to get him by and to lead him on. But I had never really intended to write a book. That was not even on any realm. What I had always done was I had written children's books. I was writing and submitting, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 manuscripts throughout the years of, probably about 10 years, and to the different publishers and agents. So that was my goal, was to do a children's manuscript, and an adult book was just never on the radar. But when David was in the hospital, I started to do digital recordings. Every time a doctor would give me news or discuss a procedure with me, or a nurse or anything that was vital, I would go into the corner after speaking to them and turn on my digital recorder and record what had been said to me so I could remember it. Because obviously, if anybody's been in, and I know lots of people have been in critical care, and that there are so many things coming at you all the time, and you're not going to remember them. So that was one of the ways that I was able to keep information. Now, the reason I did that was because at night I'd have to go home and I'd have to write an update. We called them the David updates, because my family didn't live in the same town as we did. In fact, the closest family member, other than 2 cousins that did live nearby, was 450 miles away, and that was the closest. So everybody, needed to know what was happening in his life. And instead of writing individual messages to everybody, I did what I mentioned before is called the David updates. So I had all of that information. So between the recordings and the updates, I had tons of fodder for a book. Now, again, still hadn't thought about writing a book, but after David was home for about a year after the event, and his event happened in January 2005, so in about January of 2006, or maybe a little bit before that, I was writing these updates, and I started to put them together. And I started to, I think it was a way for me to cope. David would have to go to bed at 8:30 at night, and I'd put the baby monitor on upstairs, and then I'd go to my computer, and I would either answer emails or I'd start writing this book. And I would
Donna, do you feel comfortable sharing with us what happened to David to cause his brain injury?
Oh, sure, absolutely. David always did exercises in the morning before he went off to work. And this particular morning, he did 13 chin-ups. And that he usually did 12, always did 12. And this particular morning, the 13th chin-up was the dreaded chin-up, I call it, because that's the one that changed our lives forever. Because at that point, David could feel something burst in his head. So basically, I found out later it was a subarachnoid hemorrhage. So that sent him to the hospital, into the emergency room, and into surgery right away. Then after they took care of that bleed, the subarachnoid hemorrhage, and they evacuated the bleeding, then they told me he had an aneurysm, and he had to have that removed because that was a time bomb in his head. Once they went in and we got the aneurysm taken care of, they came back and said, yeah, he's fine. He's recovering, but he has an AVM, which is an arterial venous malformation. And that caused, that's a tangle of blood vessels. It's congenital, you're born with it, and for most people, it won't bother them at all. But for 1% of the population, it will. So again, I signed on the dotted line, and we had that removed. So all of that led up to writing the book. And when I started to read these little updates to David, little chapters or little things that I was writing, he told me, he says, this is a book, you need to write this. Because he didn't know anything that I had that had happened to him for months. He didn't know what was going on. because most of the time he was in a coma. So he was like, you went through that? You know, are you kidding? So I thought at that point, you know, he's right. I should write this book, because while I was in the NICU, into the neurological intensive care unit waiting room, I was looking for information for what's going on. What is a GPEG? What is a trach? What is this Arctic blanket? Why are they doing this? You know, and I didn't have any answers. And at that time, I said I really wanted to write a pamphlet so that it could be in hospitals and in doctors' offices, just like there are a lot of pamphlets on Parkinson's or diabetes or so many different things. There's nothing there for TBI or brain injury, and I wanted people to understand that. So I've never got around to making the pamphlet yet, but Prisoners Without Bars, my book, was published. I don't know if you can see that. Was published last November 1st, and I'm hoping that it will be a help to people who are looking for consolation, maybe comfort in when they're going through this, because we know that people will be going through this. There are 5.3 million people in the world, in the United States, that have a brain injury or living with a brain injury. So that was my background, and that's why I decided to write the book.
I have tangles of blood vessels in my brain. They're referred to as cavernous angiomas. They're actually related to the AVM that Donna mentioned. I'd say they're cousins. And two of them bled, causing some interesting, all too interesting neurological deficits, including seizures and all sorts of lovely things. And my life went kaflooey, and the only known treatment to prevent future bleeds is to remove them surgically. And I had to reclaim my life. It was basically just an existence, and I wasn't able to be the mother I wanted to be. I couldn't work, I couldn't drive. So I decided to go through with the surgeries. So I had 2 surgeries to remove the bleeders, and then I ended up having a 3rd surgery that was which was an emergency. In a few days after I got back home from, I had the surgeries in Arizona, and a couple days after I got back home, I started writing because I felt completely lost. I just didn't know how I fit into the world, how I felt as though I didn't fit inside my body. I looked up, I read, I researched, and I really found nothing that really helped. There was very little there written by survivors. What I did see was focused on acute recovery. There was very little ongoing recovery. I needed anecdotes. I needed to hear people's stories, because there are a lot of commonalities in deficits from brain injuries, and I needed help figuring out the path I needed to follow in this new world. And I also figured out that if I couldn't find anything, other brain injury survivors would have a problem as well. So I thought, you know what, I'll write this for myself. I was, no guide, so I thought I'd bumble along and hopefully the writing will help me. At the same time, it might help other brain injury survivors. And as time went on, the more I wrote, the more fun I got out of writing. And I wanted to reach a broader audience. I met so many people who were so ignorant about brain injury that I felt I wanted to reach the public at large. And for that, I needed to improve my writing. So I couldn't, because of the brain injury, I couldn't attend workshops, lectures, or anything like that. So I ended up getting a writing coach. And she transformed me from a journal writer to an author of a book I'm really proud of.
So this is very interesting, actually, to hear all of these because, so I am a brain injury survivor, 31 years, I guess, post come May. So my injury happened in my home back in 1988 when I was just 22 years old. It was a ceiling fan, actually, that fell on me in my kitchen. A ceiling fan hit me, and then I fell against the counter, and then I fell against the floor. So there were 3 different, I guess, hits. The biggest thing that came out of this, biggest deficit, I guess, is that I lost all my memory. It was complete retrograde amnesia, which is unusual but not unheard of. So I was married with 2 children at that time. I didn't understand marriage. I didn't understand what children were. I didn't understand. I mean, I was a mess. And I was only in the hospital for 3 weeks. And then they sent me home. So I never knew that my life was different from everybody. I grew up with my children. I learned to read with them. I learned to count with them. I learned basically everything with my kids as they were growing up. But I never realized until I started to go to community college that I was any different from anybody. I never had any opinion of my own because I just did what everybody else did. I never had a reason that I did something. So if I told the kids to do their homework, that was something that I heard another mom tell their kids to do. So I thought, oh, that's a mom that I respect. So she's telling their kids to do their homework or pick up their room or don't bring in mud to the laundry, all these things. I didn't have a reason for anything that I did. I didn't realize, I guess, how lost I was until I went to community college. When I went to community college and started thinking, starting having to have thoughts of my own, which was a very new experience for me because I didn't have any formal education. Who I am now, don't have any formal education until 2007 when I went to community college. And then from there, I went to Smith College and finished a bachelor's degree. In 2014, I finished. But when I graduated from Montgomery College, which is community college, there was a write-up in the Washington Post about me, about how there was this person who's graduating from Montgomery College that has no memories and all this stuff. And I read this article, and it was kind of cool article, and there were all these pictures of me and the family and stuff, but there was so much missing. And so I was like, wow, that's really cool and everything, but there's so much missing. It's not just me forgetting how to do things and then suddenly going to Montgomery College. There's all this stuff in between. So I actually had a couple of literary agents call me after they saw the Washington Post article, and there was these people from the BBC that called and interviewed, and it's on the Today Show. All this stuff happened, and then I was getting ready to go to Smith College, and this literary agent from New York said, "I think you should write a book." And I said, "Well, I'm going to Smith College, so I'm not going to write a book now." And he goes, "Oh, you can do both." And I was like, "Oh, really? Okay." Well, that wasn't a very smart thing to do because nobody should ever go to Smith College and write a book at the same time. It is a terrible idea. So if you get anything out of this whole panel, please take that as something to never do. Anyway, that's what I did. And I never had any intention of writing a book. I never knew that I was any different than anybody until I started writing the book and started talking to people and started talking to my kids about things. This was never talked about in the family. This whole thing about mom didn't have any memories was just like, oh yeah, mom doesn't have any memories. So when the kids would come home and have to, use all their spelling words and, talk to your mom about her childhood and use all of your spelling words. Well, we would just make stuff up. So I didn't, it wasn't even discussed in the family. So it wasn't until I was writing the book and I was getting all of this feedback from people like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for writing this book. You know, my dad's a survivor, my brother's a survivor, I'm a survivor. I get stuff to this day, and the book was published. Actually, I have a picture of my book too. Ah, there it is. It was published in 2014. So, 5 years ago, I guess. I weekly am still getting emails and Facebook messages and friend requests and stuff from people who've read the book. And even though I didn't have any intention, I'm really happy I did it, because I agree, there is not very much out there by survivors. Well, I wonder why. I mean, I couldn't even write until I don't know how many years post, it was probably 10 years before I could even write anything. So, to write anything like that would have made sense. So yeah, I guess that was the reason. And I'm very, very proud that I did and graduated from college.
Nice.
Can you explain what you feel is most misunderstood about brain injury survival or caregiving, and clarify that for us? How about we start with you, Deb?
One of the things that actually took me a long time to figure out myself, and it was a friend of mine who pointed it out. I think as brain injury survivors, one of the things that we don't realize that we're doing is we just do what we have to do. And that's why we look fine, but then we pay the price later with exhaustion, with headaches, things like that. So a thing that people don't understand is that, yes, I seem fine, but the reason I seem fine is because I am pushing myself beyond my capabilities. And that's something that when this friend of mine said this, I went, oh, yeah, that's exactly right. And that is exactly right.
Can I add on to that a little bit? Because I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. The other thing that I think that goes along with that is very misunderstood is that I could do this, whatever this is today. Tomorrow, I might not be able to do it. Mm-hmm. I'll use a very simple example, like tying my shoes. There are days that I can tie my shoes. There are other days I cannot tie my shoes. There are days where I will get physically lost walking around the block. Mm-hmm. There are other days that I can walk all the way to the Potomac River that's 2 miles away and come back fine. There are days that I can read. There are days I cannot read. There's all of this. Just because I could do something yesterday or last week doesn't mean that I can do that today. And I think it has to do a lot with using our spoons, is what we say in our house. Using our spoons up to try to appear as normal as possible. Mm-hmm. I don't go to the grocery store by myself because I'm talking 31 years after my head injury. I don't go to the grocery store by myself because I will get physically lost in the grocery store. It's not worth it to me to lose 3 days just because I went grocery shopping. It's not worth it to me. So I think that's I think the most irritating thing that I will have people say to me is like, well, what are you talking about? You were fine yesterday. Well, not really. I was faking it better yesterday than I can today.
To answer that question about what's most misunderstood about caregiving or being a caregiver is I think that people, for example, when David first had his injury, everybody came, everybody was there, everybody was supportive. People flew in from all over the country and spent about 4 or 5 days with us while he was in critical condition in the hospital. And that's wonderful. And that's really, it was great. I mean, I needed that support. But shortly after, they all returned to their own lives, which is normal. It's natural. Of course they have to. This is not their, I might say problem. It's not their problem. It's my problem. It's David's problem. And we're the ones that have to work through it. And so, and everybody has his or her own life, and they can't stick around like that. My children did a little bit longer. They got to stay a few more weeks. But when I said earlier, brain injury is forever. It's not just a few weeks. And so everybody does return to his or her own life. And the caregiver is left there holding the caregiver ball, I guess, because it's not going away from my life. It's, you know, it's not going away from David's life as a survivor. And so we have to decide how we're going to deal with this. And there are several ways you can. You can, you know, crumble and don't, you know, and hide and don't do anything and feel woe is me and feel sorry for yourself. Or you can stand up and be strong. Well, that's how I appeared to most folks, that I did stand up and be strong. And in reality, like Sue said, I could only pretend for so long, you know, because I'm in that pretend state too. I often call myself the Energizer ostrich. Now you all know what the Energizer bunny is, and he just runs around like crazy and just keeps busy. Well, I added the ostrich in there too because I stuck my head in the sand in a way. I didn't want to know what was down the pike. I didn't want to know how things were going to go because it was too heavy. It was just too much for me to figure out and to figure out what I was going to do. So I not only put my head in the sand and kind of just dealt with day by day and not thinking of the long-term forecast there, I also kept myself overly busy. Now, David's brain injury did that a lot for me. That, frankly, took care of about the first 5 years of keeping overly busy because between caring for him once he came home from the hospital after 3 months, and when he came home, he was like a rag doll. He wasn't able to do anything. So that kept me very, very busy, just, you know, taking care of not only my needs, his many, many needs, the house that had to continue running, the bills that had to be paid. And so that kind of kept me busy there. But now we're 14 years later, and I still use that method of the Energizer ostrich. I still don't think about the future and what we're missing out on. When we're missing out on a lot of things. Obviously, I think about it a little bit because I'm able to tell you that. But yeah, we're missing out on a lot of things that we were planning that we would like to do, especially in retirement, which we both are now. So, but if I stop and think about that, it's gonna put me down in the dumps. I'm gonna be wallowing. It's gonna be, and it's gonna be no good for me, for David, for anybody. So I don't think about that. And talking with David, he does the same thing. Because again, he could be very sad and depressed over what his life has turned into, from a very active, very energetic man to a person who relies on me for many things, relies on me to get out of the house, for just a lot of things. So I think that, you know, that's some of the things that I think that people should know. It's not a broken bone that you can nurse somebody for 6 months or 6 weeks or whatever that bone takes to heal. This is something that's going to go on forever and ever. So by my still keeping busy, very busy, overly busy, I stave off all those feelings of woe is me. And I think for me that works. And not to say it will work for everybody, but for me, that's what gets me through every day, week, month, and year.
Very well said, Donna. Very well said.
Thank you.
As a caregiver myself, there's a lot that I can relate to, as Donna just so eloquently expressed. So many things are misunderstood. It took a lot of years for family and friends to understand why we would tentatively say, yes, we're going to show up to a family dinner or a party that one of our friends were holding, or we would show up and then we would sneak out the back door because my husband couldn't handle being at this event. It was just too much stimulation for him. And as he progressively gets worse, his brain is deteriorating more and more. Now we've had to re-educate a lot of these same family and friends to go, okay, I'm showing up without him because I need to have a life without him, because I now have to accept the fact that we're young. My husband is not going to live to a ripe old age with me. And as hard as it is, through lots and lots of therapy, I have to learn at times to continue to move forward, even when he's not able to. And then there are times that I don't. I stay home with him as well. And it's something that some people just don't understand. How can you leave your husband at home? How dare you go have a life without him? And it's like, how dare I wither away to nothing while he withers away as well? It's an ugly web that you tangle and mix with. And it's an unfortunate habit. With concussive injuries, he had 5 blast injuries in Iraq. Well, 4 blast injuries, 1 Humvee rollover. It's amazing how differently his body responds. It's not any different from anybody else's TBI, mind you, but his body is just slowly deteriorating, and it's not understood why he can't just go and retrain himself to do things. And people don't understand why I can't allow him. They think I'm prohibiting him from going out and doing things. As our 2 lovely survivors have pointed out, that they can go and do one day, but the next day they can't. We have a family motto here of our everyday changing new normal, because we don't know what we will adapt to from one day to the next, or even 1 hour to the next. Something that he's done for months on end, all of a sudden doesn't do anymore. You know, one of the little things, minor things, we have a towel rack right outside the shower, and he went through several weeks of not understanding why his towel wasn't hung up on the towel rack. Well, he quit hanging it up on the towel rack by the shower and hanging it up on the one over by the sink. But he couldn't comprehend he was doing that. And he was getting so frustrated. So I would have to follow up behind him after his shower and go hang it back up where it belonged, so that way he would have some normalcy and less triggers for him to get angry. With his brain injury, he does have a lot of anger issues, and so you have to find the triggers and keep those down, because he's not aware of his anger issues either. And those are things that are misunderstood, because I've had some family tell me I need to put him in a home and not keep him at my home because of his anger issues. And so those are another thing that are misunderstood. And I just look at him and I say, it's not him. He's not cognitively aware of his behaviors. I keep very good close contact with his medical team at the VA and his civilian doctors, who all still talk to each other. They've crossed those lines very nicely, thankfully. And sadly, we've had to medicate him for these behaviors, but it's everything we can do to keep him at home as long as we possibly can, because I have a feeling the second we put him into some kind of facility, he'll just deteriorate even faster. And I don't want to have that happen, because he is at times aware that he's lost a lot of his freedoms, and he goes, hey, I fought for our country. Why am I losing my freedoms at home? Even though he doesn't cognitively understand why. And so it's just one of those things that not only are we misunderstood, but he misunderstands himself too. So it's just one of those continuous webs.
Thank you for sharing that. Are there any moments when you completely freeze, break down, or feel like you can't go on anymore?
Yes.
Definitely.
Many, many, many moments.
The shower's a great place to cry. It washes away the tears.
Amen.
Well, I can tell you a story about, this was on in the beginning of when David's, was still in the rehab hospital. And like I already told you that I kept my head in the sand. I didn't think about anything. But this particular morning, as I was walking out the door, the doctor had, my phone rang, and I listened, and the message was the doctor, which I thought, okay, that's not good news when a doctor's calling your home at 7 a.m. And so I ran upstairs, answered the phone, and he told me, he says, don't worry, but David has fallen out of bed and has got a goose egg on his head. And he knew I was coming in soon. So, of course, don't worry means to worry, right? So they don't tell you not to worry if there's nothing to really worry about. But so that particular morning, I'm driving to the rehab hospital, driving down the highway, and I can just, actually, I hadn't gotten to the highway yet, but I was on the local roads, and I just remember just slamming my hands down on the steering wheel and going, why? Tears streaming down my face. And that was probably the only time that I feel that I really almost lost it. Of course, I had to get myself back together again before I entered David's room, because I did not want him to know how I was feeling. I was keeping my all of my emotions at bay when I was with him, and kept smiles on my face and all positivity, because that was what I believed was going to make him better. And if he saw me, freaking out over something, I thought that he would get really worried. So yeah, that was the time that I really, really broke down and cried. And I guess another time too, Jeannette, prior to this, was in the shower. Yeah, you can cry all you want in the shower, and nobody can hear you, so you can get out some of that frustration and the anger, the grief, everything that you go through when you're going through this kind of an ordeal.
And for me, I'm continually grieving as I watch my husband deteriorate. It's a continuous process. And so, yeah, I have a lot of those freezing moments, breakdown moments. And yeah, I don't know how often, but I do. I question myself, and I wonder, how much longer can I continually be in the same home with him because of the anger issues, because they're physical and verbal. I mean, there's so many different things. And then I also look at the man and say, he's my hero. Mm-hmm. He, not only because that he served our country, but because of all the things prior to that he did for me and with me and with our daughter. And, it's just a big mix of emotions.
So in 2015, summer of 2015, I actually tried to kill myself, and I was done. I was just so tired of living this way, this minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day thing, and not being able to ever count on myself to be able to be, I don't know, whatever normal is. So I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to do it anymore. I was done. Obviously I'm here, so it didn't work out so well, but
I think it did work out well.
So, but yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. I know Donna has said this, and I think everybody's said this. This is forever. This is like your new life, and you can't do anything about it. You can't do anything about it. You can't do anything about not being able to count on yourself, which sucks. Really sucks.
Oh, I've also been suicidal a couple of times, but I don't know. I guess I'm on enough medication that doesn't happen anymore.
What medication?
Some of us caregivers call those happy pills.
I mean, before I took them, I was a mess, and every so often, being an idiot, I would say, "Oh, okay, I'm doing so much better. I could go down the dosage," and then things would happen again. But now, I'm not going to say I'm happy, but overall, the interesting thing is that now when I have bad brain days, and it's okay, this will pass. It's okay. And when I'm having good brain days, it's, oh, this is good. Everything's been good. It's always been good. Life is great. I mean, I'm just completely, I'm a whack job is basically what happens. So the bad brain days, I know are going to pass. I mean, yesterday I had a really bad one, and I just went, okay, tomorrow will be better. So I think it has something to do with the meds, but I'm not sure.
Well, again, not even knowing yesterday or this morning if I was even going to be able to do this panel. Like I didn't know. I didn't know if I would be able to do that, and not being able to be counted on to like follow through on things just is not fun for anybody. So
Caregivers are the jugglers and balancers for not only their own life, but also for the lives of their care recipients, as we've been discussing. And it's a challenging task. How can caregivers relieve some of the tension and stress that accompanies caregiving?
Mm-hmm. I can jump into that one right away.
I'll arm wrestle you for it.
I'm sorry?
I'll arm wrestle you for it.
Okay. We'll share. So caregiving, how do you relieve it? Well, in the beginning for me, there was no relief. Not in the very beginning, not much at all. There was, when David was so needy, and he had gone through, I mentioned earlier, he went back down to infantile state where he was not able to do anything for himself. Feed himself, dress himself, his personal hygiene, everything had to be done for him. And so that, of course, does not leave much time for the caregiver, the person taking care of that person that's living with you with this brain injury. So I really can truly say I didn't get to do much for myself. I did do, even at night when he went to bed, I did the updates. So I was writing, which I like to do, but I was doing something with a purpose, with the purpose of getting this news out to the family and friends who were eagerly waiting to find out more and more about David. So unfortunately, it went on that way for probably about 5 years, where I really did not have a chance to do much at all for myself. At the 5-year mark, it was in December, I felt that David was a little, he was getting more able to be by himself. He was going back to work, but he was being accompanied by another professor until he got to his building. Then once he was in his building, he was always, it was a stable situation because the floors, and he has extreme balance issues. So the floors were steady and everything. They were solid and flat, and no, weird expectations like you might find on a sidewalk where there's stones and, cracks and things. So, but he was, so while he was at work, I was at work. And when before he got home, I would do the errands. And then it was all David time again. So in December of, I think it was 2010, yes, I went back to the theater. I started to go, I went to my first theater meeting and quickly got swooped up into the midst of it all, where I started to do assistant stage managing. I went and painted scenery. I did, helped out with the props, helped out with the house managing. I was just doing everything I possibly could just to something for me, something that I really wanted to do. And I had been retired in Well, no, I wasn't retired yet. I was almost ready to retire at that point. So, and then of course, once I retired, I kicked it up even a little bit more there. So that was the first time I actually was able to do anything for me. Now, that being said, I think that that's not the best way to go. I think that caregivers really need to take some time for themselves every day, every hour if you can, but every day for sure. You need to take time because otherwise you're going to burn out. And as you've all heard the flight attendants say, put on your mask in the event of cabin pressure, the dropping cabin pressure, put on your mask first and then help others. And that is a true statement because Jeanette's laughing because she knows. Because if you are not able to care for you, you're going to totally deplete. You're not going to have anything left to do for anybody else. And then what happens? If you become angry, you become frustrated, and you're going to be taking it out on the person that you're trying to help, the person that you love, that you want to help, but you're not going to be able to. So what I say now, I give a lot of talks to different groups, and I always try to tell them, no matter what is happening, take 5 minutes for yourself during the day. 5 minutes. If it's a cup of tea, cup of coffee, which I really love, but I'm not allowed to have anymore, which is really horrible. But anyhow, so a bubble bath. I had a panel, a guest on my radio show the other day, and she was taking a bubble bath immediately after the show. So some people still do that. David said, nobody does that anymore. I said, guess what? They do. But anyhow, you've got to find something, whether it's a walk around the block, call a friend. You've got to take a few minutes to come down and think of nothing but yourself. And so one of the things that I've devised with my talks that I give is the me time stones. And I just have a whole slew of these little black, smooth, polished stones of all different sizes and all different shapes. And I pass them out. Anytime someone buys my book, for sure, I pass them out. But I'll pass them out to anybody. If I think that you're in need, or if I'm talking to you and I just feel like, okay, you need some time to take it. And it doesn't have to be a caregiver. It can be anybody, because we all need this time. We all need me time to stop and just stop teaching calculus. Put that book onto your computer. It works well there for a while. Stop. It's just kind of things like that. You just have to stop and think of yourself and do something. So when I pass out these little stones, I always wonder, well, how are people going to respond? This is kind of weird, isn't it? But I'm getting such a great response for it. I was giving a talk the other day, and I offered one to the waitress, and they're all sitting on my table. I should go like this. They're all sitting on my table, because I'm doing it on my table and you can't see me. But and so this one waitress comes up, and I told her she could take one and why, and she did do that over the table. She put her hand over each rock and just kind of went like that and said, I'm trying to see which one calls me. Oh. And then she did. She found one that called her, and so she was really grateful. And it's just a simple concept, but I think it goes a long way. And I gave one to a friend in the theater the other night, and she picked one out, and it was like a heart. And so the next 2 days later, I came back. I was working in the theater again, and she was there, and she goes, Donna, I have to tell you, I used your me time stone. She said, I happened to feel it in my pocket, which is what I tell people to do. Keep it in your pocket. Keep it somewhere where you can use it easily. And, just when you feel it, think about doing something for you. So Sherry goes and she says, I was rubbing it, and all of a sudden I said, I need to take a nap. And she goes, you know what? I did. And I went, yay, good. That's good. It's working, because it's making people stop and think. And that's what we don't do in this busy life, is stop and think. And I think especially, I said for everybody, but especially for caregivers, somebody who's giving their lives to help another life get through, you've got to stop and smell the roses or rub the little black polished stone, the little me time stone. So, and if I'm not there to give you one, go find your own. Find your own stone that you can put in your pocket and use it to think about you.
Well said, Donna. Well said. I love it.
Thank
You're
you.
always a wealth of knowledge. For me, I do everything in the house because he's physically and mentally not able to balance a checkbook, chief bottle washer, handyman, yard maintenance, laundry, you name it. I'm the one who has to coordinate it all. His schedule, medical schedule, recreational schedule, personal life, all of it. I'm it. And it was becoming extremely overwhelming. I was pulling my hair out because I am one of those who likes things organized. I'm not going to say I'm the A-type personality or a little obsessive controlling or anything that is. But yeah, I am. But I realized that every time I went to the doctor, because we spent, the first 5 years of his life, several days a week, somewhere. We started out at the Elks Rehabilitation Center, but we were never inpatient. It was always outpatient. And then we transferred to the VA, and it was several days a week. And it was so frustrating because we would always hear, well, someone with his level of injury would always be inpatient, but we never qualified for inpatient, and they could never give us an explanation. And so he never got the consistency he needed to develop anything. And so it was everything that we had to develop. I finally had to start studying up and figuring out what I had to do at home because he was baffling everybody. And I'm like, okay, I know he's not the only one. But there again, I kept hearing, people at his level are always put into an institution. They're never sent home. And I'm like, well, that can't be. We've got to figure something out. And so that's when I started developing things at home. And that's where the name of my book came about, Our Central Command Post, because I knew I had to relate it to something military to relate to him. So that way he would feel like he had ownership in it, because he needed to have that personal bit into it so that he would feel that part of it, so it would be a part of him, so that he would hopefully take to it. And then the family part, growing up Presbyterian, there's food around everything important. So I knew the kitchen was going to be a great thing because there'd be food involved in everything we did. And yay, something finally stuck. We had a flood in our kitchen. So I was like, I can redo the kitchen cabinets. It took a lot of months, but I finally found a cabinet maker who willingly worked with me to simplify our kitchen. I didn't want little pull handles. I didn't want any little things that caught dust and things to that effect that would make it harder to keep the kitchen clean, because I wanted something simplifying for me. I wanted a plexiglass inlay on one of the cabinets to help keep Dwayne's schedule in. And I mean, it just a whole bunch of things. And then I wanted a good solid finish on it so I could stick Post-it notes and tape on so I'm not pulling the finish off. And this cabinetry maker, he was a blessing. He actually brought his wife into it because I was starting to talk over his head. He needed to have someone help center him. And so it was awesome. It became really cool on the setup of our kitchen, because we ended up having to redesign the kitchen a little bit where we could to relay it out to fit things where they went. But then he saw my refrigerator and he's like, you're a magnet person. What are we doing in this kitchen for you? So the me time, as Donna was putting it. And so he did some cabinet doors that have metal in them, but yet have the wood finish so I could continue my magnets over onto the cabinets. So that was really nice. But the main thing that I had to learn was to let go and to simplify. And yeah, I got my book too. But that's what my book focuses on, is the cognitive disabilities. We've got a lot of wonderful occupational therapists out there that help you deal with a lot of the adaptive cares that you need for your everyday living, your ADLs as they call it. But the cognitive disabilities, there's not as much out there that you have to learn to live with, and it affects the caregivers just as much. The ever-changing daily new normal. And that's where I would start writing articles about, hey, here's what I did. You know, simple little thing as a little square Lucerne milk crate to lift the trash can up, because Dwayne couldn't reach, even though it was a tall trash can, Dwayne couldn't reach it to throw trash away. And I got tired of picking trash up off the floor. And then the wall had all that trash slime on it. And just a simple little thing of raising the trash can up about yay tall helped him, but it also helped me, because now he can hit the trash can and I'm not having twice as much cleanup. You know, a few people thought it was because of the service dog that we have, but no, it's because of him. So it was finding ways to simplify my home to support Dwayne. I love Post-it notes because they come in so many different sizes and shapes and colors. So when his new normal changes, I can change the sticky note to match his needs. And it's great. But because I don't want him to be singled out, I put sticky notes up for myself, and then our daughter put sticky notes up for her, so that it's a family affair. So that way we are all in this together, because he needs to know that we support him for who he is and what he's capable of doing at that time. And that's what we do. And so like we have this super long hallway that only has one light switch at the front of it, and our daughter's room's at the very end of it. And when she was younger, it was terrifying. Even though there's a night light at the end, it would still scare her to walk down the dark, long, dark hallway at night. So I stuck a sticky note above the light that says, Addie, remember to turn off the light when you come back down the hallway. So that way Daddy remembered that she was going to turn off the light and he wouldn't get mad at her. Now, he thought the note was for her. Really, it was for him, so he wouldn't get mad. But it, it played a dual purpose. So it comforted Adelaide so that she knew she wasn't going to get yelled at, and it comforted Daddy to know that she was going to take care of the light when she was done. So she would go to her room, turn on her bedroom light, come back down, and turn off the hallway. It worked really well. And that's what we do, is how do you simplify your life? How do you make your home flexible? It's a stick-built home. How do you make a stick-built home flexible to fit an ever-changing new normal of cognitive disabilities? So that as a caregiver, you're not running around crazy mad. So going back to support what Donna says, you can take time. Now, I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, most mornings, and go to the gym because he's asleep. And I don't have to worry about what he's doing. And I get my middle break time. For me, it is an addiction to go get my middle break time at the gym. Most of the time, there's not many people there. I put my headphones in, I ignore the world around me, and just do my workout. It's not a social time for me. It's a quiet time. And then I started a nonprofit, and we did research on how recreational therapy not only benefited the veteran, but the military family as a whole, as one of the many modalities needed to help prevent suicide. Because the caregiver suicide rate, now I don't know about non-military, sorry, I just know about the military side. The non-military caregiver suicide rate is just as significant as the military veteran suicide rate. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to find ways to help slow that down. And we know there's many modalities needed to support that. And we have found through research that recreational therapy of many formats, not just physical activity, quilting, theater, things to those effect, also make a huge impact. We got big enough that we had reached our capabilities. The America's Warrior Partnership took us in, so that was nice. And I needed something else to fill my shoes after that because no longer had R4 Alliance. So I found Team Rubicon. growing up in a military family, found another niche to fill my gap that I needed, and I can do my teaching. I can be around other people who understand. I don't have to explain what's happening with my husband because they've been there. They understand, they can relate, and they support, and it's nice to have that. And I can be me without being questioned. And then I have my Elizabeth Dole Foundation, which is for military caregivers, which is another outlet. And I love it, as well as all my advocacy that I do in public speaking. So it's nice to have those outlets. It's nice to be able to care and share and help other people understand so that we aren't alone and other people know where they can step in and fill in gaps. I know asking for help as a caregiver is really, really hard because I know I've got a lot of stubborn German blood in my family and it runs thick. And asking for help is extremely hard. So I have a paper on my cabinet door that has a list of things that need to be done around here that I know I have to have help getting done. So friends and family come in and they know to look on that board because I'm going to be too stupidly stubborn to ask. But they can say, I can help with this. Here are the dates that I have available. When can I come in and help you with it? And that's been my compromise. Not only that, but I wrote an article on it and shared it so people knew that I was stupidly stubborn on asking for help, and that's how I got the word out. And other caregivers were like, yeah, I need to do that too. So it was not only helping myself and my family, but helping other families find their strength to move forward too.
So many brain injury survivors say that their lives are now fuller, richer, and that they are better people. Based on your own experience, do you agree? And this is addressed to Sue and Deb.
No. I don't agree. I don't know what else to say. I don't know what else to say. I don't think that my life is better now at all.
In my case, I do agree. Let's see. I feel like before the brain injury, in many ways, I was living, well, I mean, this has almost become a cliche, at least for me. I feel like I was living in pastels, and now I live in brilliant colors, and that is both literally true and metaphorically. I have trouble dealing with large volumes of sensory input. And what happens is that various pieces of data come in with the same value. So I can't distinguish between, for instance, if there's several conversations going on around me, I can't focus just on one conversation. They're all coming in at the same time. And whether it's someone who's yelling versus someone who's speaking softly, it all sounds the same to me, especially when I'm tired. But on the flip side, it also means that I'm much more conscious of details around me. For instance, social cues, I'm much better at reading them. Think socially inept mathematician, wow, I can pick up on social cues now. That's kind of a thing. But also things in nature, much more aware of them, and the variegation in the color of the sky, various things like that. So there's that side in terms of living in pastels versus brilliant colors, is that actually in colors I see more, I'm aware of more. Now, when I say metaphorically, I feel that in some ways I was very much numb to the world. Now I feel more connected. Even in terms of, for instance, I mentioned socially inept mathematicians. I had to take a crash course in asking for help, which meant it was really tough for me because I was used to being this independent, fiercely independent woman, and suddenly I have to expose my vulnerabilities. But one thing I realized was that by exposing my weaknesses, I was actually turning them into strengths, because I realized that when you expose your vulnerabilities, people are much more comfortable opening themselves up to you. So I became able to connect with people better. I enjoy people more. I don't know. I feel more connected. I've also, in the aftermath, as I said, I started writing. Well, writing has become a passion now. I have trouble going a day without writing. I have to, unfortunately, on bad brain days, but whenever I can, I write. So there's a lot of my life that's changed that wasn't there before. And that stuff in itself, I mean, if you think about it, I went from being very much of an introvert to very much of I was going to say an outrovert, but
extrovert.
So in many ways, my life has definitely become fuller.
Nice.
But the bad brain days, I don't look forward to them. And I'm very happy when they pass. But now it's more than 10 years since the brain surgeries. The bad brain days are fewer and farther between. So I feel like the gains far outweigh the losses. Yes, life is much harder now, but so much more fun. I mean, seriously.
I wanted to add something on there too, because now I'm talking. Well, obviously I'm not the survivor, but I do write a blog called Surviving Traumatic Brain Injury, and where I interview survivors and caregivers, and there's a 20-question template there. And one of the questions on the template is your life better or worse since your brain injury? And of course, I'm expecting everybody to give answers like Sue did. Of course it's worse. Well, what a silly question that is. And yet it's always very surprising to me when I get answers like, no, I'm a much better person than I was before. I like myself better. That sort of thing. I'm getting so many amazing responses like that I just never would have expected to get. So I guess, I'm not going to say it's 50-50. I don't know what it is, but there are people that, and I also get the other side of the coin too, where they say, no, my life is really horrible now. I miss being my old self. I miss everything I used to do. So, but it's interesting how the brain injury impacts a person's brain and changes their thinking about themselves too. So I think that's kind of it's kind of interesting, and it's interesting here that Sue on one hand says no, it hasn't gotten better and it's not so great, and Deb's over here saying, yeah, I think that my life has improved. And so I think those are the two different sides of the coin that that most people don't know about. And I think that's one of the things that we're doing as we raise awareness of brain injury during March or any month of the year, is to help people to understand what people are going through with this.
I guess I don't want to be such like this negative Nancy person, but I have to stick by what I said. I lost my independence.
Mm-hmm.
I lost me. I've had to make a new me. And, I'm 50 some, I don't even know how old I am. I'm in my 50s, 53, something like that. But and my body is that old, but my mind is 25. My mind is is that old. You know, that's how old I feel, because that's how many years I remember living. So I don't really fit in. Obviously, when you look at me, I don't fit in with the 25-year-olds, but I also don't at all fit in with the 50-year-olds. I don't have a place for me. So that's kind of a weird place to be. So it's just, I mean, it's many things, but again, I don't mean to be so negative, because I have it a lot better than a lot of people, you know. I do. I know that I do, but.
Well, if it helps, Sue, my husband has a mentality of a 15-year-old in a 52-year-old's body, so.
Well, that's me.
And he doesn't feel like it's benefited him at all either.
I you know, I don't want to be so negative, but.
It's okay.
Keeping it real.
I totally understand the idea of keeping it real. I mean, that's very important to me. Because, I mean, that was part of the thing with writing my book, is that I wanted to keep it real. It isn't all wonderful. Things happen. But when I weigh the losses versus the gains, I have to say that in my case, I really feel that that's the gain. And I feel lucky. I know that that's not always the case for everyone. I feel lucky that that's the case for me. I mean, for instance, when it comes to teaching, I had to relearn mathematics. I mean, I had to start from the multiplication tables. And because of those struggles, I became much more empathetic towards the weaker students. Because of becoming more of an extrovert, I connect better with the students. My brain had to rewire, because I was primarily a linear thinker, and that got damaged. So I had to rewire and compensate for that. So I learned to appreciate different ways of thinking, and all those things together made me a much better teacher. I enjoy teaching much more. I'm passionate about it. I gained this passion that I didn't have. Nice. But I know I'm lucky with that. I get it.
What do you feel are sources of your strength, and what are some tools you can recommend to others dealing with brain injury, either as a caregiver or survivor?
Okay, I'll go. Well, go ahead, Sue.
Okay, I was just gonna say it's pretty quick answer with me. Music has the creative side of me. So I'm a drummer. I'm in a rock band. I love to play guitar. I love piano. I love writing songs. I love writing. Any kind of creative outlet, especially in a musical sense, is good for me. That sort of gives me strength and power. The other one is physical exercise. So whether it's taking a walk, whether it's taking a run, whether it's jumping on my trampoline, whether it's, doing 50 push-ups, whether, whatever, jump roping, whatever it is, I can't get through a day without some kind of creativity or some sort of physical exercise. On the days that I can't do either of those things, it's not a good day. On the days I can do both of those things, even if it isn't a good day, it's a good day. So those are my sources of strength.
I feel the same way about writing. I mean, it's the one thing that got me through the really bad patches. I didn't write before the brain injury. And it's really kept things in perspective for me. It's helped me understand what was going on, because I didn't understand. As I said, I felt completely lost. I didn't know. It felt like someone dumped me in the middle of a desert or something, and I had to find my way out without a compass. Writing was my compass. I was bumbling along, following my nose. Writing helped. Other forms of strength, people. As I said, I had to learn to ask for help. My support system, people. I did something again I didn't used to have.
People to me are a double-edged sword. I'm interrupting you again, Donna. I'm just going to say,
Okay.
people are a double-edged sword to me, whether it's family and or friends. I know that I need them, but I tend to isolate. So, because sometimes it's too much. I found it interesting what you said before, Deb, about how you lived in pastel colors before and now you have brilliant colors. To me, yeah, I have the brilliant colors, but it's too much. Like the world is just too much for me. I can't focus in this world. I have the same issues. Again, this is 30 years that I'm talking about. I still can't be in a room where there are multiple conversations because I can't filter. I still cannot filter that out. So that it's like I want to live in that pastel colored world. The bold colors is just, it's too much. It's too loud. Everything's just too much. And I'm a drummer, so go figure.
Yeah, I have. Yes, you're right in that sense. But I've adapted, as in I don't go to parties, I don't go to sports events. I live the life of a hermit in many, many ways. I'll be happy to just sit and write.
All right, Donna, you're on. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So, so many people will tell me that I'm very strong. And I don't see where that's coming through at all, because I don't feel like that. But I think what I do and where I gain my strength is that I need to help other people through this, through brain injury, through the caregiving stance of it all. I just feel like that's where I can do the best for I guess for others, but also I guess in the essence, it's also for me, because I'm feeling that I need to do something. So what I do is I mentioned my blog earlier. I do the Surviving Traumatic Brain Injury blog. So I give other people a voice, a platform to be able to tell their stories. And that makes me feel good that I'm able to do that. I do it. Why? Because I can. I just, I was able to figure this out, get a blog up there, get a website up there. And so I'm able to do that. So a lot of people do look to the blog to have a voice, to be able to tell their story. And then the other thing I do is I have a radio show called Another Fork on the Road, and it's on the braininjuryradio.com/blogtalkradio.com. And twice a month, first and third Sunday, I do a radio show, again, giving survivors and caregivers a voice on how to, get their stories out, to let them be heard, and for the audience to understand that, if they're also going through a surviving, a brain injury, that there are other people out there. Because when David had his brain injury, I didn't know anything about it. And I didn't have any access to anything. A few books, as Deb mentioned earlier, were out there for survivors, but nothing much. And that's why I mentioned I wanted to do that pamphlet. And then, it finally came up to be the book. But so in 2014, I just decided I have to do something. I was retired already, and I had to do something to give help to other people. And fortunately, at that same time is when I found Facebook. And I think that for those of you out there who do have a brain injury or are caregivers for a brain injured person, you find Facebook and find social media, because you can hook up with so many different people. I know people all around the world, and I've become very good friends with them. And right now I'm sitting on a panel with 3 women who I've known for quite some time now that I met through Facebook. And I've learned their story. I've given them a platform, and it's a camaraderie that comes from all of this. And so I feel that, if in person support group would be good, but if you're not able to, and I know I wasn't able to, and there weren't any around, the Facebook support groups are really very helpful. So I think that that's what I would suggest for folks who are out there, either survivors or caregivers. Get yourself in there, just start talking, tell your story, let people know what you're going through, ask questions, vent if you have to, and just get everything off your chest and be able to share your experience with somebody else, because you will definitely find somebody else who will say, yeah, that happened to me too. What are you doing about it? How are you handling it? So I think that that's another way I think that people can just muddle your way through it with people's help. I think that's all.
I have a few close friends and some family members who always call me Wonder Woman, and I say, yeah, I wonder what I'm doing. In fact, my daughter bought me a Wonder Woman costume for Halloween this year because she looks up to me that way, and I look at her and I'm like, I look at you that way. I've got a lot of strength from this beautiful 20-year-old daughter that I have through the years. And it's quite phenomenal to see the strength that this young woman has grown up with. Seeing her dad come home injured like he has, and to know how much she sacrificed and has never once ever complained or has ever said anything that she has felt cheated in her life because her dad came home injured. And I feel like she has been cheated. She didn't have much of a childhood because she always chose to stay home and take care of her dad more times than any, instead of going out with her friends. So I have good strength with my daughter, but I've also had to learn that I couldn't rely on her all the time because she needs to be a kid. I have good strength and a new developed friendship with my big sister that I never imagined would ever come. We've always been close, but now it's even more close than I could ever imagine. And my real friends have come out. I know who we can rely on. I know who I can call on when I need someone to come sit with Dwayne or help calm him down. And so we have our little village that's here. And that's a huge strength for me, because they are our village that's here for us. And the best part of it is they come with no strings attached, because they know that we're not always able to reciprocate. I try. You know, if I'm cooking something, I make an extra batch of cookies and I'll give them that, or I try to find ways to show how much I appreciate them. And that's where, as Donna said, Facebook comes in handy, because I will make it publicly known, hey, look, so-and-so just came and sat with Dwayne and they did XYZ, and thank you. I couldn't have done it without you. Because that does show, as Deb pointed out, a weakness that was filling for me, because I had to admit I couldn't do it all. And it shows gratitude for someone who stepped in and said, yes, I could do. As a caregiver, we have a lot of strengths we never knew we had. I have huge social anxiety in friendly settings, going to friends' parties and gatherings. I always relied on Dwayne and would stick to him like crazy before his injury. I still have that social anxiety, but have had to learn how to live with it. And it's amazing the strength that you can find in yourself when faced with adverse conditions. Neither one of us asked for this life. We had all these big hopes and dreams and plans as we got older and into retirement life that none of them will happen. But we've learned to adapt and overcome the best we can and live with what we've got and with who we've got. And that village is vital. The Elizabeth Dole Foundation, Team Rubicon, and our village is what makes the resilience and the strength continue to move forward.
Thank you so much for sharing today, everybody. All the panelists' books are available on Amazon, and you can find out more at their websites, donnafigurski.com, debbrandon.com, or on their Facebook pages, Central Command Post and Forgot to Remember Book. We wish you a lot of success with your books, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.